My name is James Jacob Prasch. Wonderful to be with you. You know, we live in a world where a lot of crazy things are happening. But as Christians, we are to know not only why these things are happening, but how they will end. Unlike fortune tellers, the occult, astrologers, mystics, we actually do know the future from the Word of God. There may be other prophetic revelations, but if they don't agree with Scripture, they're not from God. Scripture is the basis of everything. There is no new doctrine, and anything that's going to happen will happen in accordance to what we are told. Now, these books are not always the easiest to interpret, the apocalyptic literature, sections of Ezekiel, certainly Daniel, certainly Revelation and Zechariah. Nonetheless, as we get closer to the return of Jesus, the Holy Spirit illuminates these things more and more. That is the meaning and nature of the word apocalypse, as we've explained before. Unveiling. As we get closer to the return of Jesus, the curtain goes up and up and up for the faithful church, and the faithful church sees clearer and clearer and clearer. The book of Revelation makes more and more sense. Book of Zechariah, more and more sense. Book of Daniel, more and more sense. Book of Ezekiel, more and more sense. The Olivet Discourse, more and more sense. 2 Thessalonians, more and more sense. Peter's epistles, more and more sense. The closer we get to the return of the Lord, the more the curtain goes up. No new revelation. Seal these things up. They're there. But with the return of Christ impending, these things become unsealed. Of course, this, in major part, relates to the seven seals we see broken in the book of Revelation. The seven seals we see broken in the book of Revelation, chapter 6, particularly. Well, let's continue looking at this. Events as they are transpiring at the moment. I'd like to look at three, focusing on the image of the beast. The image of the beast. People have talked about it for many generations as being some kind of a robot, or a computerized robot, something electro-bionic. Those things have always been suspected by Christians. But we're seeing an evolution in that direction in multiple avenues of science and technological development. Most particularly in biogenetic engineering and in artificial intelligence. More about that shortly. There are three things that are gravitating the world towards the direction of Revelation 13 as we speak. There are actually more than three things, but there are at least three primary things we see. One is the unfolding of world events in the political realm, particularly the Middle East and in Europe, but also globally. The second is deception in the church. That must precede the coming of the Antichrist. The faithful church will not be deceived. The unfaithful church will be. But the unfaithful church will be composed of many people falsely claiming to be evangelical. Many churches and denominations that in the past had said they were born again. We see this happening now. We've seen the wholesale apostasy taking place with things like the Assemblies of God and the Elam movement in the UK during the Toronto and Pensacola deceptions. We see the Southern Baptist Convention, its president J.D. Greer, saying that Baptists must be the number one advocates for homosexual and lesbian rights. To them, that's the right to adopt, the right to bring children up that way, to artificially inseminate. And born-again Baptists must be the number one spokesman, according to the president of the Baptist Convention. We see people like John MacArthur, Jimmy DeYoung, and others teaching it will be possible for people to accept the mark of the beast and still be born again and go to heaven, in direct contradiction to Revelation chapter 14 and Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. These are deceptions. We know the Antichrist will build a global interfaith movement that, in league with the world's political and economic system, will be the platform for the Antichrist to arrive upon. And we see Rick Warren's global peace plan, We must unite with people, Buddhists, Hindus. We must unite with Mormons. We must unite with the Roman Church. We must unite with other people, even with other gods. Forgetting the fact that Moses said other gods are demons, as I pointed out, shadim, and Paul said they're demons, demonoi. Rick Warren says we must unite with them to bring in global peace. We know the Antichrist will bring in a false peace. He will come on a white horse, of course, in Revelation chapter 6, when the first seal is broken, trying to counterfeit the return of Christ, and Revelation 19, coming on a white horse. He counterfeits, and he will bring a counterfeit peace. The prophet Daniel explains this. He will certainly attempt to bring a false peace to the Middle East before showing his true colors. And religious organization of the world's false religious systems will be a major part of this. But you have Rick Warren saying we must unite with these people who worship demons, who worship other gods, called demons in Scripture. People with a false gospel. Is salvation by works or is salvation by grace? Is salvation by sacramental ritual or is it by second birth? Does the blood of Christ cleanse from all sin, or do you atone in purgatory for your own? People who believe in this different gospel are anathema in Galatians chapter 1, but that's okay with Rick Warren. Rick Warren is in turn promoted by people like John Piper, who leads the visualization Lectio Divina with Beth Moore and Francis Chan. Piper, in turn, is defended by the sycophants of John MacArthur, such as Todd Friel. They defend him. They defend the man who actually is advancing an antichrist agenda, telling born-again believers to worship with false religion, cults, and those who worship other gods to bring in a global peace. This is what we're seeing, deception. Deception perpetrated against the elect, much of it coming from the Reformed camp, as well as the traditional sources, such as the Word, Faith, Money preachers, and the neo-Gnosticism and mysticism of people like Bill Johnson and the New Apostolic Reformation, which is, of course, predicated on mysticism and Gnosticism. It is not scriptural spirituality or scriptural doctrine. Nonetheless, Jesus said these false teachers and false prophets would come to deceive the elect, and there they are. So we have the false teachers and false prophets. And then we have the unfolding tide of world events. Just look at this particular week in the United States following the murder that took place by the police of that individual in Minneapolis. Now, this is not political. I'm just looking at the actual facts. Those 4 policemen were immediately fired. They've all been arrested and charged, one of them at least with second-degree murder, the others as accessory. Now, of those 4 policemen, 2 appear to be Caucasian whites. 2. One is obviously an Asian, yellow. And the 4th one appears to be Afro-American descent or mixed Caucasian and black. Would he be considered a black person by complexion? So you have a mixed race black officer, you have a Caucasian officer, we have an Asian officer and another Caucasian. They've all been arrested. They're being charged. But last weekend in Chicago, just last weekend, 10 Afro-Americans were shot dead in the streets of Chicago. And so far, not a single arrest has been made. Yet the mayor of Chicago, a homosexual Afro-American, a lesbian Afro-American, who was caught up in a bit of a scandal recently, forced all the coiffures and beauty parlors to close down, but she said she had a right to get her own hair done because she's the mayor. 2 standards, one for the elite and one for the rest of the people. And she is storming on and on about what happened in another city, Minneapolis, ignoring what happened and what is happening in her own. Let's look at the facts. Just over a year ago, a Caucasian Australian woman was shot dead and murdered by the police in Minneapolis. It should have been a wake-up call. But the mayor of Minneapolis, Mayor Frey, a left-wing mayor, the mayor of St. Paul, and Ellis, the Islamic Attorney General of the state, a former member of Congress. The Attorney General, the mayor, they did nothing after that Caucasian woman was murdered. The chief culprit of these policemen who committed the murder had multiple charges of abuse against him in the past. He was never put on desk duty or administrative assignment or anything like this. There was no effort to reform the police department in Minneapolis. In fact, their budgets were cut to pay for other social services that proved useless. Why didn't the mayor of Minneapolis, why didn't Ellis, the Attorney General of the state, do what they were elected to do? People have a right to protest because this never should have happened and could have been prevented. But the fact that it happened to a white woman, the fact that not all of the officers were white, that the politicians who failed to clean up the police when they had the warning of when the Australian tourist woman was murdered are composed of at least the black mayor of St. Paul and the black attorney general. That's all forgotten. The mainstream media doesn't talk about it. The protesters don't even protest them. It's a joke. Now this proves that not all cops who murder are white. It also proves that not all their victims are white, but it's racialized and politicized. Meanwhile, in Chicago, all the victims were black, shot dead by other blacks, and nobody says a word. Black lives do not matter to Black Lives Matter. They may matter to me, matter to you, but black lives do not matter to the political left. They certainly don't matter to Antifa or to Black Lives Matter. Remember, for every person shot by the police in America, even justifiably, only 25% of them are Afro-American. The rest are not, mainly Caucasian. Only a minority of those who are shot. Additionally, every study shows that a white policeman is less likely to shoot an Afro-American than an Afro-American policeman. Additionally, for every Afro-American shot by a policeman or killed by a policeman, for every one, 56 black Americans are murdered by other black Americans. 56 to 1. But the media gives one perspective. We saw this in Baltimore when that chap died in the police wagon after being arrested, spurning all kinds of riots. The police commissioner, the chief of police, and the mayor were all Afro-American. The mayor backed the police off during the riots. The drug gangs went on a killing spree. The murder rate in Baltimore went through the roof. More blacks were killed because the police were ordered to back off. Black lives don't matter to left-wing black politicians in Baltimore either. Now, of those 6 officers who were indicted over the death of that Afro-American, 2 of them were Afro-American themselves. Not all bad cops are white, and not all the victims are black. Just a lie. Let's continue. Let's look at Charlotte, North Carolina. An Afro-American police officer, an educated man, went to a Christian university. He's a Christian. Told a black convict on parole with no right to have a firearm under the conditions of parole. He was on parole. He did not have Second Amendment rights while on parole. People on parole or probation cannot carry firearms. He had a firearm. The black officer told this ex-convict, who was also Afro-American, 9 times it was recorded, to drop the weapon. This ex-convict did not drop the weapon. The Afro-American officer then shot him. It unleashes race riots. They treated this black cop as if he was white, and they racialized it. Riots in Charlotte over a criminal, an ex-con with a gun getting shot by an Afro-American police officer when he wouldn't drop the gun after he was told to drop it 9 times. A gun he had no right to have. But it becomes a race issue. They treat this as if we forget the cop is black. Only matters that the person he shot was black. Forget the fact that he was a convict and that he had no right to have a firearm, a loaded firearm. It was a justifiable shooting by a black officer, a Christian. Didn't matter. Riots, Baltimore, Charlotte, Minneapolis. Let's continue. Let's look at this even further. Where else does this stuff happen? I disagreed, as did many people, as did many conservatives, with the verdict in the Eric Garner case in New York City, where someone committing a very petty crime, selling loose cigarettes that were untaxed in front of the shop of somebody who had to sell taxed cigarettes, calls the police. He resists the police, and they go to arrest him, but they put him in a chokehold, and he winds up dead. There should have been a charge of manslaughter. Instead, it gets politicized and racialized, so it becomes a charge of murder. Why didn't it work? Why was there no conviction? Politically motivated, they overcharged. What they haven't told you, what you have to read in the small print, the officer in charge of that arrest, the officer in charge of that takedown was a New York City police sergeant, an Afro-American woman. She was in charge of the takedown of Eric Garner, another black officer. A sergeant was the senior ranking officer on the scene during the takedown. She did not stop the chokehold. The cop walked. Lost his job, as he should have, but there was no conviction. You racialize it, you politicize it. It happens in New York, it happens in Charlotte. With Trayvon Martin, the police said there's no case here. We'll never get a conviction. It becomes politicized and racialized. They arrest this chap Zimmerman. Spike Lee, the film director, goes after a family in California because the name is Zimmerman, thinking that they're the parents or family of the killer, the white killer. It turns out the killer was not white. He was Hispanic, and he was unrelated to the people that Spike Lee tried to sick the hounds on in terms of public media pressure and exposure. It was a Hispanic. One member of a minority killing another member of a minority. But it gets racialized. Let's continue. What's happening now in Ferguson? Ferguson is sort of like a rundown city on the outskirts of St. Louis. It's basically almost St. Louis. You have Michael Brown in the company of someone who is an ex-convict who in the past pled guilty to lying to the police and who at the time was wanted for robbery. There was a warrant for his arrest. He was an ex-con and there was a warrant for his arrest again. And in the past he pled guilty to lying to police. He and Michael Brown enter a shop owned by an Asian. They assault the Asian, a member of a minority, and steal a $50 box of cigars or something stupid. Robbery assault. A cop recognizes him. This guy who pled guilty in the past to lying to the police says it was hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Come Al Sharpton from New York, who then pulls the same stunt that he pulled in the Twyla Briley case in New York. Having protest demonstrations, hands up, don't shoot, something that never happened. Both autopsies, including the one performed by Dr. Michael Baden at the behest of the family, the private autopsy by the family, and the first autopsy, all of the forensic science and the ballistics prove it was not a hands up, don't shoot. The officer had major facial injuries when he was assaulted by Michael Brown, and they found Michael Brown's fingerprints all over his holster and firearm. He assaults a cop who recognizes him after he pulls a robbery and assaults a shop owner. Cop recognizes him. He attacks the cop and goes for the cop's gun, and he gets shot. Big crime, hands up, don't shoot. All at the say-so of somebody in his company who's an ex-con who admitted he lied to the police in the past and who was wanted for robbery. Here comes Al Sharpton. Here comes the left-wing press. Here comes Antifa. Here come the riots. Hands up, don't shoot. This is crazy. This is insanity. What about the mass murder? The massive murders we see taking place in city after city where you have liberal Democratic mayors and city government and large Afro-American and minority populations. Nobody says anything. You can kill all the blacks you want. Just don't be a police officer. Even in justifiable cases. Now that case in Minneapolis is an outrage. True, the victim is an ex-con, spent 5 years in prison for armed robbery. That doesn't matter. Most people, he paid his debt to society for what he did, and most people who pass on a $20 bill that's counterfeit don't know it. They got it from somebody else who doesn't know it. It's the counterfeiters, the printers, and the distributors who are the real criminals. The Secret Service looks for those guys. The chances are you or I at some point may have inadvertently passed on a counterfeit bill and not known it was counterfeit, and the person who gave it to us didn't know it was counterfeit. Obviously, bank tellers can recognize these very often. So can money changers in the Bureau de Change, and so obviously can Secret Service agents. But many merchants can visually recognize counterfeit money. But the average person doesn't. Why was this guy treated the way he was? Even if he resisted the officers. After he was handcuffed, why was he held down the way he was? That's the question. And there may have been a second officer who put his knee in his back and compressed his diaphragm. That would be 2 murderers and 2 accomplices. It needs to be investigated further. But they were all fired immediately. They were all arrested and charged. They're all in deep trouble with the law. All of them. If there's somebody to protest, it's the Attorney General of Minneapolis and the mayor of Minneapolis and of St. Paul. Why did they let these things happen? They had the warning last year when the Australian tourist, a woman unarmed, was murdered by that same police department. Why didn't they do anything except cut the budget? So we go. The hypocrisy of the political left that now dominates the Democratic Party and of the left-wing press is nothing less than astounding. And the real victims of this become the minorities themselves, especially blacks. But nobody says anything. They don't care if black people get killed in Philadelphia and Chicago. Happens every day of the week. A cop who does it gets caught. Gang member who does it, nobody sees anything. They want to cut the police budgets and cut police presence. That's going to kill even more blacks. Now remember, it was Donald Trump who brought prison reform in response to the Democratic Party's 3 strikes and you're out policy of Bill Clinton, where people with nonviolent crimes were being given long prison sentences, disproportionately high number of them black, something Joe Biden voted for. It was Donald Trump who came against this, but they're blaming him for something the Democrats did. It was the left-wing Democrats who did this in Minneapolis. Well, what does this mean prophetically? Why do I talk about these issues? As we've said in the past, ethnon will rise against ethnon, nation against nation. Racism increases. And it increases dramatically. Unbelievable. You want to see the real oppression of blacks. You really want to see blacks being systematically impoverished. Look at what the ANC has done in South Africa. After apartheid, they replaced one evil with a worse one. Infant mortality, black longevity, everything has gotten worse. Certainly crime. Look at what Mugabe did in Zimbabwe. Look at what Idi Amin did in Uganda. Look at what Papa Doc Duvalier did in Haiti. You really want to see the oppression of blacks? Go to countries with black governments. But the media doesn't talk about that. You can kill all the blacks you want. They don't care about black people. It's only when it's in their political interest to use the black person as what they see as a useful idiot, a political football, like Biden. If you don't vote for me, you must not be black. Oh, my good Lord. You're the one who voted for Clinton's 3 strikes and you're out. Why would any black vote for you? Democrats are the party of slavery and Jim Crow. Oh, we don't talk about that. Hillary Clinton's mentor was Byrd, Senator Byrd, a Grand Dragon or something in the Ku Klux Klan. We don't talk about that. Al Gore's father was a senator from Tennessee who was a segregationist against civil rights. We don't talk about that. Bill Clinton's mentor, George Favor, was a white segregationist. We don't talk about that. It's all politics and lies. They don't care about black people. All they want is power for themselves. It doesn't matter what color they are. Barack Obama had 2 terms of office and did nothing for black people. Bailed out Wall Street banks, but black unemployment remained consistently high, particularly among youth. Nothing changed for black people under Obama. They don't care about black people. To them, black people are just useful idiots, political footballs. That's what they're doing now with this outrage that took place in Minneapolis. And don't get me wrong, I hope they throw the book at those cops who were responsible. That should not have happened. That was not a legitimate arrest technique. Once the guy was handcuffed and subdued, if he should have been handcuffed and subdued, the arrest shouldn't have happened. Now I've got policemen in my family. My mother's family are all Irish cops. I know cops. Most of them are not corrupt. Most of them are not racist. But it happens. Let's continue looking. Society's falling apart. You've got generals insubordinate to the commander-in-chief. Perfectly constitutional to have an insurrection act enacted that's on the books for a president to put down an insurrection that is unlawful. Perfectly. You've got a defense secretary and generals being insubordinate to the president, those generals should be court-martialed and the defense secretary removed. The president is the commander-in-chief. The civilians control the military. They're not independent. But it's all breaking down. America's becoming fascist like any other country. Mathis is another one. Against Israel, now he's over in China talking to the Chinese. Let him stay in China. But let's look further. Nation will rise against nation. Notice when it came to the coronavirus. Oh no, the left said, you got to keep a distance. We got to close down businesses. Close down the schools, close down everything. Got to keep a distance. But when it came to protest, what happened in Minneapolis, even though the culprits had been arrested and charged, oh no, we're going to ignore the coronavirus and let the people march. They don't care about the coronavirus, they just politicized it. If it's so dangerous, why are you supporting these protests? Now, don't get me wrong, the people in Minneapolis have a right to protest. They should be protesting the mayor of Minneapolis and Ellis for letting this happen. After that woman was shot last year, they should have made the reforms necessary, and they didn't. The people have a right to protest peaceably. But burning down shops, looting, stealing, arson, that's not protesting, that's insurrection. They don't care about justice. They care about power. The left today is not the left of the 1960s. I came from the left of the 1960s. This is not the left of the 1960s. I'll tell you what kind of left Antifa is, funded by George Soros and company. Adolf Hitler was a socialist. Joseph Stalin was a socialist. Bolshevik thuggery. That's what these people are. They are not like the hippies or the civil rights movement of the 1960s. They are ideologically very different. But let's continue. This week, we look at what's happening. It's almost frightening. In state after state, controlled by left-wing governments, churches are closed down. But abortion mills and marijuana clinics are allowed to stay open. Go get some reefer and go kill your baby with no clinical reason, but you cannot go to church. Now understand, there are people in Britain and America and elsewhere who require medical treatment, operations, surgery, physiotherapy. These things are being postponed. Medical tests are being postponed because of the virus. And people are getting sick and in some cases dying because of it. Things that really are essential. But they'll make an exception to abort your baby. These people are from hell in the way they think. They're demonically controlled in their mentality. And go get some reefer, but don't go get a biopsy or a CT scan. It goes on. These church closures with Phil Murphy in New Jersey and these other places like Newsom in California, it goes to the Supreme Court. We have Chief Justice Roberts, an establishment Republican, a Bush Republican. It was Roberts who took Obamacare and rewrote it. He rewrote the legislation, making it a tax. So the Supreme Court sustained it. They couldn't sustain the law that Obama pushed through Congress. So they rewrote the law. This was Roberts. This man is a disgrace. He shouldn't be a judge. He shouldn't be anything. questions from Senator Rand Paul during the bogus Trump impeachment. He wouldn't take the question from Rand Paul because it would have embarrassed the political left. Unbelievable. Would have exposed the whistleblower. Now he's done it again. This enemy of judicial integrity is what I see him as. This threat to democratic freedom, which is what I see him as, this establishment Republican, has done it again. He's voted with the liberals, saying that churches can only be filled up to 25% capacity. Now notice other businesses and events, as long as they have a 6-foot distance, they don't restrict the numbers. Within fire regulations and so forth, they don't restrict the numbers. They're only restricting churches to 25%. And a corrupt Supreme Court with a corrupt Chief Justice who's anointed by Satan is attacking the religious freedom of Christians and undermining what this country, the United States, was largely built on. Persecution. You'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Oh, it's okay to burn that church in Washington. The rioters were told, don't worry, the police are not going to go at you full force. They burned the church in Washington, but don't attend one, says the Supreme Court and says the Democratic Party. So it goes on. YouTube, Google, censoring free information by independent medical scientists and physicians that contradicts the World Health Organization. A political mouthpiece for China. Originally, the World Health Organization downplayed corona, said there was no need for masks. Then they said they got it wrong and they changed everything. How can you trust and believe these people who are simply there not as a voice for science or public health, but for the political ambitions of China? A dictatorship in violation of human rights who sprung this virus on the rest of the world. Oh no, you disagree with the World Health Organization. We're taking you off YouTube. Democracy's going, folks. When a nation that turns its back on God, its freedom is going to go. The Western world, the Protestant democracies, have turned their backs on God. Hence, the democratic principles engendered on the basis predicated upon scriptural principles, both in parliamentary democracy in Britain and presidential democracy in the United States Constitution. It's going. It's going! It's unbelievable. They allow Islamic organizations to get away with things unspeakable. They allow the Council of American Islamic Relations to run amok in America. Even though they're affiliated with terrorist organizations like Hamas, the Bush family gave it their blessings because it's funded by the Saudi Arabians that arrest and even beheads or hangs Christians. It happens. Didn't matter to the Bush family. They're just as evil as the Democrats. Now, I'm not pontificating or I'm not editorializing politics. I'm stating facts. Christian rights are under attack. And it's happening in fulfillment of prophecy. Well, let's look at what's happening in terms of deception in the church. There's another one that's come about this past week. We've warned in the past that following Brother Stuart Toole having gone to be with the Lord when he was director of Intercessors for Britain. That organization was hijacked and turned into an apparent family enterprise directed by an unqualified individual named Dave Bourlaise, who was a supporter of David Nathan. David Nathan is the chap who says God the Father is not the creator, that you can pray into a tie or jacket and swing it around and knock people over for healing, that the gospel is not eternal, that the blood of animals can and will take away sin in the millennium, etc. He was a sycophant of David Nathan. And he opposed us because of our opposition to David Nathan, but he's in charge of Intercessors for Britain. Well, he's at it again this week. There's an article, excellent article, written by Sandy Simpson. You can read on the Apologetics Coordinating Team website, and it's carried on various other websites as well, including Moriel and Be Alert and so forth, and on Facebook. Dave Bourlaise made statements supportive of Bill Gates. You know, Bill Gates with the ID 2020 initiative that many Christians are upset about, where he's trying to link vaccination with implantation of microchips. That is the basic plan. Some people think it's a prelude to the mark of the beast. Many Christians are upset about it. Bill Gates, of course, is pro-lesbian, homosexual, bisexual, and transgender. That's his official position of him and his charity. And also he is pro-abortion. But Dave Bourlaise says he's a good man. And if governments dictate these things, we should be good Christians and do what the politicians tell us. Well, this has caused a considerable amount of upset. We should obey the laws of man when they don't cause us to disobey the laws of God. But if he has this view, why is he using a Christian ministry to disseminate it, to propound it? His fondness and support of the plans of Bill Gates and so forth, most Christians I know are troubled by what that means and the way it shows society is going, that they can mandate a chip implantation. Otherwise, you'll be quarantined. That's where these technologies can take us and will take us. Well, then he goes on to say that there is a distinction between taking the mark of the beast and worshiping the Antichrist. You must do both to be condemned. Take the mark and worship the Antichrist. This seems to be what he said by his misreading of Revelation chapter 14, verse 9, and Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. That it's not just taking the mark, it's taking the mark and worshiping the Antichrist. We are told in James, let few of you be teachers. Teachers will be judged more strictly than the rest. They'll be judged more strictly than the rest. Well, let's see what it actually says in Revelation chapter 14, verse 9. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark, possess it in his forehead or in his hand. God did not give his word in English. He gave his word in Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic. Nehemiah 8:8, the priority is always on the original meaning of the original languages. Kai tritos agalos, iko leth esen, otos legon, and phone. Kai and, that's a conjunctive. Okay. Tritos, third, it's nominative singular masculine. Angelos is angel or messenger, nominative singular masculine. And ekolothesin is a Indicative. It's indicative aorist, active, third person singular, oitios. It's a personal pronoun that's dative, plural, masculine. Legon, saying. That is a verb participle. That's a verb participle. And it basically says if anyone is doing this, saying this, and he heard it in the sound, and preposition phone, which is a dative singular feminine. So it's saying present active nominative singular masculine, which is a verb participle, in the sound. Okay, let's continue. Loud, that's adverbial, it's dative singular feminine. And then I is just simply the word if it is a conditional particle, or just called the conditional. Then it says tis to therion, any the wild beast, literally. Tis is very interesting in what it means. It is an indefinite pronoun, which is nominative singular masculine. Two, accusative singular nominative, to therion, the wild beast, which is accusative singular. Let's continue. Nominative, accusative singular. I believe it's not nominative, it's a wild beast. Okay. Proskunai, again, indicative mood. Proskunai meaning is worshiping, and it's present active third person singular. Kai, another conjunctive. Ten, icone, the image, oto, of it, which is a genitive singular nominative. Icone is accusative singular. Okay. And another conjunctive, kai, conjunctive. Labenai, again, it is indicative mood for the third time. Okay. Present active third person singular, indicative mood. Karachma, that is accusative singular. Epi, which could mean on or it could mean around, it's simply a preposition. Of to, which is genitive singular, that means of the forehead. The metoro. It's genitive singular. Auto, of him, which is a personal pronoun, genitive singular, possessive of him. Or, just means or, it's a particle. Epi, around or on, which is a preposition. Ten, the, again, this is just an accusative singular feminine. Hand, kere oto, of him, which is accusative singular, and a possessive pronoun, genitive singular masculine. What Mr. Dave Belaze is saying is there's a distinction between taking the mark and worshiping the Antichrist. You have to do both. He makes it obvious that he's ignorant of the way the original language works and what the text means. He assumes the word and, in Greek it appears, can mean what it does in English, in addition to. You must do this and that. In Greek, it is not like that. And kai is a conjunctive. A conjunctive in Greek means that the term is linked to the previous clause or statement. There's a link between them. It's conjunctive. You also have in Revelation 24 a negative conjunctive, which we translate as neither. And in Greek means that they're part and participle of the same thing. If something is in addition to, it is not that term. It is peresos, meaning plus or more abundant. Or it is pleron, meaning greater in quantity. or furthermore, this plus more than that, this in addition to that, this plus this in more abundant quantity. Peresos and pleron. Kai does not mean 5 and 7 is 12 in Greek. No, kai is a conjunctive. There's no separation. No separation. A conjunctive joins two elements of equal syntactic importance, and it is non-mathematical in Greek. It's not like English. Rightly dividing the word of God. Now, I've known some fine preachers who are not literate in Greek or Hebrew, but they didn't say irresponsible, dangerous things like Dave Belays. The man obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. Anybody who went to seminary or Bible college and knows Greek would laugh at him. They would laugh at him. He sounds like a religious buffoon who doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't care about that. That's his business. What I care about is he's telling God's people that Intercessors for Britain is telling people there's a distinction between taking the mark of the beast and worshiping the Antichrist. You have to do both. No, if you take the mark, you have worshiped the Antichrist. It's conjunctive. He sounds ridiculous. Let few of you be teachers. Teachers will be judged more strictly than the rest. What has happened to Intercessors for Britain when it was taken over by the Bourlays family and put in the family pocket is a tragedy. It was once an honorable, Christ-honoring organization. Now it's telling people we shouldn't be upset about Bill Gates 2020 saying you've got to link being vaccinated with a chip implant. Christians shouldn't worry about that. Should submit to the government. Or forget the fact that he's pro-homosexual and pro-same-sex marriage and pro-abortion. He's a good man. And that's his view, that's his view. But why use a Christian organization as a platform to teach such things? But once he begins to distort the text, once he begins to twist the word of God, he does what Peter warns about and against. This is him. This is Dave Bourlays. He's a dangerous man as well as an ignorant one. I will debate him publicly in front of a camera, live streamed from the Greek text of Revelation chapter 14 and Revelation chapter 20. He does not know what he's talking about. He's teaching serious error. If you take that mark and you worship the Antichrist, they are part and parcel of the same thing. There is no separation. Kai is a conjunctive. Additionally, the mood 3 times is indicative. If there was any question, if it was something precarious where it would suggest, well, it doesn't have to happen if you take the mark of the beast unless you worship the Antichrist also. If it was that, it would not be indicative mood. It would have to be subjunctive. When there's an element of doubt like that, the mood is subjunctive. Subjunctive mood is very important. All moods are important in Greek. Ask anyone who knows Greek, please don't take my word for it. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's an ignorant person and a dangerous one. And I will debate him or his father in front of the camera before independent Greek professors. But let's continue. Deception in the church. The way society is gravitating, but there is a third. Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is becoming artificial curiosity. It is gaining momentum exponentially. I've been reading and listening to some of the founders of the internet, like Vint Cerf. I've been reading some of the pioneers of artificial intelligence. What they're saying is frightening. Daniel Kahneman. Think fast, think slow. Or Sapolsky, Behave, from Stanford University. That was his book. What these people are saying is very interesting. But in the hands of falling man, it's frightening. Sapolsky is looking for correspondence between the way information is processed organically by human cytons, human brain cells, and the way it's processed electronically in artificial intelligence. There is stimulation that is incitatory and inhibitory. What happens when artificial intelligence can begin to approximate this? When it can begin to function something along the line of human cytons with dendrites and axions. Organic microchips made of carbon already exist. Now, this technology has a way to go, but it's going. And it's gaining momentum. In fact, some of the research is increasing exponentially. We already have artificial curiosity. What do I mean? In artificial intelligence, you have software programs, digital programs that can write other programs. No human author. There's a human author of the master program, but you create something that can write its own programs. And then you have many of them networked. Where is this going? Where will it end? Remember, anything fallen man can use for evil, he will. Radioactive isotopes to fight cancer or to make cheap fissionable material for nuclear detonation as a terrorist bomb. Can be used for good, but the world is in the power of the wicked one. Fallen man will use anything he can for evil. Take a gun. A gun can be used for hunting. A gun can be used for self-defense. It can be used as a sport for target shooting. A gun can be used for good, but they're used for evil. The world is in the power of the wicked one. Any human technology will be used for evil unless it is subordinated to the principles and hand of Christ, which they're not. Darwinism has tried to rip science away from Christianity and has largely succeeded under the empowerment of Satan. In 1987, something happened that many people forget unless they're in the world of economics. Black Friday, 1987, during the Reagan years, and the Reagan hyper-deficits. Computers began issuing sell orders. They were analyzing market trends in the security exchanges in New York and London, and they began issuing sell orders that other computers detected. And sell orders were issued not by humans, but by machines, and the market crashed. Ronald Reagan went on TV and he told people, keep up the deficit spending, keep using your credit cards. Essentially, that's what he said. Don't cut back on spending or we're not going to get out of this. That's what he said. Habakkuk says, woe to those who become rich by borrowing. This really happened in 1987. Sell orders issued by computers. Now, the Russians had a hand in it and things like this. That is another problem. When you have cyber warfare, and cyber warfare is much more advanced now than it was in 1987. Artificial intelligence has gone way beyond this, to artificial curiosity. Originally, you had Big Blue. Big Blue could beat most people in chess, It could beat most chess players, but not all of them initially. Some could tie it. Some chess geniuses could tie it. But then came Alpha Zero. Alpha Zero can beat anybody in chess. And it's a machine. Machines that seem smarter than humans. Unbelievable. We now have pseudo-neurons under research and development. They're not perfected yet, they're in their infancy, but they're imitating human brain cells with thousands of dendrites. And we have perceptrons. Again, they don't work well on their own, but when they're multi-layered, they work increasingly well. Perceptrons. We are talking about biocyber. We are talking about software meeting wetware. Now let's understand this. Let's look, please, to the book of Genesis. What happened to the Tower of Babel? Genesis 6, 1-3. It came about when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. There was a demonic attempt to mix the seed, as Moses forbade, to genetically corrupt the human race. And the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, the ones who fell. We and others have warned for many years that the Antichrist and false prophet are going to use extraterrestrial phenomena, and biogenetic engineering, I said this 25 years ago, was going to cause a mixing of the seed. Now, Jesus was emphatic. He was emphatic in Matthew 24:37. He said it will be just as in the days of Noah. Just as in. Somehow, according to Jesus, this must happen again. I said that 30 years ago. You can listen to the recordings. They still exist on old DVDs and things of that nature. Most of the teachings are on the internet. That was 25, 30 years ago. What about now? God said, it'll seem like nothing will be impossible for them. Oh my Lord, when did this happen? Well, it happened with the Tower of Babel. What took place with the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11? Verses 1-9, we read this story. Let us go down at verse 7 and confuse their language, that they may understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there is the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. Ooh. Nothing will be impossible for them. We're Imago Dei beings, made in God's image and likeness. God restricted our access to the tree of life unless we turn to Christ, that we not live forever in sin. God set human longevity at 80 years because of sin. The only reason it's still under 80 years is because of the higher death rate and the lower longevity in the third world. People in the developed world are easily living over 80. The average human age, God cannot allow to go beyond 80. But we're heading that way. And He cannot allow people to have one language. Well, we have one language. And with artificial intelligence, people are becoming fluent in it. Alexa, just Alexa that many people have. It seems marvelous, but it works in over 100 languages. Google Translate. Take your cell phone, go to Tokyo, put it in English. Where is a Japanese restaurant that serves Western food, please? It comes up on the screen in Japanese. The Japanese person sees it in Japanese, answers in Japanese. It comes up on their screen in English. Digital technology reverses the Tower of Babel. Babylon the Great under Antichrist will be Satan's second attempt to do what he did. Just as in the days of Noah, it'll be Satan's second attempt to do what he did before the flood of Noah. What's in Genesis comes back in Revelation. And these things are underway. Now, where am I going with this? I'll tell you in a moment. But let's begin to look, please, at the image of the beast in Matthew 24:15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel, originally an Aramaic term of shikutza meshomem, there's going to be a recapitulation by the Antichrist of what Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, did in the book of Maccabees. Jesus recognized this when he celebrated Hanukkah in John 10. Jesus recognized this happened. There was already an abomination set up in the temple. Zeus is the corruption of the Greek word theos, God, associated by the Greeks and Romans with the planet Jupiter. It was the biggest planet, thus the main god. And Antiochus gave Zeus his own figures, his own features on the statue and the image set up in the defiled temple, the book of Maccabees that Jesus acknowledged in John 10. But then Jesus tells us in the Olivet Discourse it's going to happen again in some way. And we see this in Revelation in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It'll happen again. What happened in the days of Noah will happen again. Satan will try again. What happened with the Nephilim, he's going to try again. What happened with people having one language, thinking they can usurp the place of God, he's going to try again. Babylon is going to try again. Antiochus Epiphanes, who was defeated by the Maccabees, Satan is going to try again. The future can only be understood in light of the past. If you don't know history and biblical history, you're never going to know prophecy. But let's continue looking at this. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. Look at it, please. A very interesting passage indeed. And we're told something incredibly interesting. The man of lawlessness, the anthroponenomon, revealed the son of destruction who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. The rapture and the resurrection, that is the episunagage, our gathering together to be with him, 2 Thessalonians tells us, will not take place unless there is an apostasy. A falling away comes first. Now you have some crackpots like J.D. Farag and the Thomas Ice is saying the apostasy is the rapture. That's absurd. It is not hapex legemini. Paul uses the same term one other place in Scripture, and it is in an eschatological context in Timothy. And he says there will be an apostasy in 1 Timothy chapter 4. He says it's going to happen. In the last days, this is going to take place. What's going to take place? Well, read what he says. There will be a great falling away. The Spirit explicitly says in the latter times, some will apostatize, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrine of demons. No, that is not the rapture. That is a rebellion. That is a departure from the truth. It is not a spatial departure. Again, among the many false teachers who Satan is using to mislead the church are these people who are saying that the apostasy is the rapture. Let's continue. Now, I don't confuse these people with the traditional pre-tribulationists who I respect, like Dr. Mark Hitchcock. I disagree with them on the timing of the rapture, but they're theologically valid. They don't say this. Mark Hitchcock rightly says if that was the apostasy was the rapture, it wouldn't say apostasy, it would say harpazo, and he is absolutely correct. So I say to pre-trib people, which kind of pre-trib are you? A J.D. Farag pre-trib, or are you a Mark Hitchcock pre-trib? Are you a traditional pre-trib, or are you a newfangled crackpot pre-trib who says the apostasy is the rapture? And some of the people who believe this and teach it should know better. I don't mean J.D. Farag, he probably doesn't know better. Not to insult him, but he's not a theologian or an academic. But Thomas Ice knows better. Wayne House knows better. What are these men doing? No, the apostasy must come, and the image of the Antichrist must be set up in the temple. Now remember, the temple has two meanings, it's ambiguous. It is a tribulational temple in Jerusalem. And it is the church. The apostate church will see the Antichrist worshipped in it. Oikos Hagios, the holy house, the Heron, the Naos, the 7 Greek times the church is called the temple in three different major Greek terms. The church is the temple. The apostate church will follow the Antichrist. He'll be worshipped in the temple. And he will deceive Israel and the Jews in Jerusalem. The image of the beast. But let's continue looking at this. Daniel 9:27, please. He will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. In the middle of the week, he'll put a stop to sacrifice, and grain offering on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. There are some people who say that that's Jesus who puts an end to sacrifice. That's crazy. Where is the ministry of Jesus 7 years? It was 3.5 years. But there are people who teach that nonsense. Particularly hyper-reformed ones, certain ones. Let's look at Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, and its width 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dora in the province of Babylon. And the people had to bow down and worship it when the music sounded. We explain this in my book, Shadows of the Beast. The Aramaic dimensions of this come to 666. Aramaic is similar to Hebrew. I'm going to count to 6 in Hebrew. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav. The first 6 letters of the alphabet are numbers. It's alphanumeric, like Roman numerals. Greek is the same. From this comes a method of biblical interpretation in Hebrew called gematria, in Greek called isopsephy. Be that as it may, that's 6. 6s in Hebrew, however. 6 is shesh. 60 is sheshim. Literally 6s. How do you say 60 in Hebrew? 6s. Not 6s. Sheshim. Now you can say sheshim v'chad, sheshim v'shtayim, 61, 62, 60 and 3, and so forth. But it's plural of 6s. Sheshim. And Aramaic, shetim. Shetim. Almost the same. Something like Norwegian and Danish. Almost the same. Almost. It comes to 666 in the Aramaic wordplay. What Nebuchadnezzar did is a picture of what the Antichrist will do. Everybody will have to bow down to it. Everybody. Otherwise, it's going to be considered a criminal sentence. And you won't be able to buy or sell without it. Now let's understand this just a little further. The image of the beast in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, let's look at it. Verses 11 to 18. I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. False prophet is often called. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it worship the first beast, whose fatal one was healed. Performs great signs, so that even makes fire come down out of the heaven to the earth in the presence of men. He deceives those who dwell on the earth. Ephesians says we should be dwelling in heaven spiritually. Those who trust in this world. Signs which it was given to him to perform. Counterfeit, what we call in Hebrew, Nesim v'niflaot. False signs and wonders. That doesn't mean they don't happen, but it means like it's Pharaoh's magicians. They happen by demonic power or by some kind of deception that goes beyond leger demain. The stage is being set for that now. You look at most of these people manifesting in things like Toronto and Pensacola, under the ministry of people, false teachers like Michael Brown, a false prophet. What are these people doing? That is a combination of hypnotic induction and demonic deception. You begin confessing you have a demon in you, and you get the demon deliverance ministry. Where is a demon ever cast out of a saved Christian in the New Testament? It isn't. Oh, but I manifested. You begin confessing you have a demon inside of you. You're giving him a key to the door. You're opening yourself to demonic oppression. They manifest. Satan is already setting the stage for what the Antichrist and false prophet will do with this pseudo-charismatic and pseudo-Pentecostal phenomena. Now, I believe in biblical charismata. I believe in biblical Pentecostalism. Most of what you see today is not real. It is neo-Montanism. That's the theological term. Much of it are things that Paul warned the Corinthians about. It's mysticism and an emotionally charged religiosity counterfeiting spirituality. Most prophecies today, as I've said many times, are not authentic prophecies. They're clairvoyance. Most tongues is not real tongues. It's gibberish. Sometimes it can be demonic, as with the witch doctors and Sagormas in Africa. Shamans do it. I do not deny what's in Scripture. I just say most of what we see today is not scripturally authentic. It's deception. So we have these signs and wonders. And telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound with the sword that had come to life. Let's understand image. Icon. Icon. There are variations of it, but the word is called icon. Pay attention. The Antichrist counterfeits Christ. The false prophet counterfeits the Holy Spirit in some way, but he also counterfeits the harbinger, John the Baptist or Elijah, pointing to the other beast. It's a counterfeit. He comes on a white horse in chapter 6, counterfeiting Christ in chapter 19. This image is a counterfeit of Colossians 1:15. To understand the image of the beast, we must understand it's a counterfeit. Colossians 1:15. He, that is Jesus, the Christ, is the icon, the image, like a mirror reflection of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Show us the Father. Have you not seen me? The total character of the Father is manifested in Jesus. What's God like? Look at Jesus. That's what God is like. He's the image of God. The image of the beast will be the same thing in satanic counterfeit. It'll be the image of Satan. What is Satan like? Look at the Antichrist, the ultimate one. A counterfeit icon. Now, let's go a bit further with this. It's quite a story. Quite a situation indeed, the image of the beast. I'd like to acquaint you with two different Greek terms, sfragida and charagma. Sfragida and charagma. The seal and the mark. Let's look at the seal. Revelation chapter 7, verse 3. Do not harm the earth or the sea or trees until we've sealed the bondservants of our God on their foreheads. Now, this obviously relates to certain Old Testament passages. First of all, it relates to Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 4. Before the judgment could come, the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, even the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and groan over the abominations which are being committed in the midst. Those who see the Antichrist and sigh and groan over the abomination of desolations will have the seal of God. It's the letter Tav in Hebrew, originally shaped like a cross. We have a teaching on Ezekiel 8 and 9 from a number of years ago. Greater abominations than these will you see. It's available on the internet. Greater abominations than these. It also relates to tefillin from the Torah, also mentioned in Isaiah. You shall bind them on your arms and on your forehead, on the right arm and the forehead and on the doorposts. The mark of the beast will be a counterfeit of these things. It'll be a counterfeit of the seal. The charagma is a counterfeit of the sfragida. God uses the sfragida. What that is one object makes an impression on another, like having a document notarized. What is on the signet is used to make the impression on another parchment or document. That is the seal, sfragida. What the Antichrist will do is different. Charagma, a mark. That is something which is penetrative, scarring, a subcutaneous incision of some form, an implantation, a permanent mark that cuts into the skin. God never does that. In the Torah, Jews were forbidden from doing that. Remember, the priests of Baal cut themselves in the days of Elijah. That is charagma. It's demonic. The seal of the Lord is sfragida. Now we read about the seal of the Lord in Ephesians 1, chapter 13, verses 13 and 14, and in 2 Timothy 2:19, you will read about the seal of the Lord. It is an impression embossed. It's pressed into something, but not cut into something. It's on, not in. As charagma. Secondly, it was always voluntary. Slavery was outlawed among the Jews. In the Old Testament by the Torah, God did not allow it. He only allowed indenturism, bondservants. You were legally bound to work for somebody until the year of Jubilee, if you got indebted to them or something. The year of Jubilee, there would be a repatriation of wealth and a setting free of the bondservants. The people were the Lord's. They were not to own other believers as slaves. Okay. This branding, this kerygma, this permanent marking, was the mark of a slave. Now, a Hebrew could choose to remain as a voluntary bondservant permanently. If he was well treated, that was his choice. I've got it pretty good. He's a brother. He used to be nice. And they would drive a gold nail through his ear, through the cartilage tissue, into a doorpost in a ritual, usually at Passover. But there was no slavery. Revelation 13, it's not voluntary. It's compulsory. It's compulsory. The Lord does not force anybody to accept Christ. Does not force anybody to accept Christ. Do not believe the hyper-Calvinists who teach that form of predestination, that if you were created for heaven, the Lord has predestined you. He will regenerate you spontaneously, then you will get faith. After you've been born again, that's nonsense. You need to have a measure of faith before you get born again. You are quickened. God puts a measure of life back into the corpse. Do not believe extreme Calvinists. No, God does not create people to go to hell. And what we see here is it's voluntary. People become servants of Christ on a voluntary basis. I volunteer to follow Jesus. I want to follow him because he's the way, the truth, and the life. Because he died in my place and rose from the dead to give me eternal life. I choose to follow Christ. By the grace of God, I choose to follow Christ. But I choose to follow Christ by the grace of God. There's not anything voluntary in Revelation 13. Nope. That's how you get the seal. That's how you get the sfragaida. In the kerygma, he causes all, the great, the rich and poor, the free and the slaves, to be given the mark on their hand or on their forehead. In other words, what you think and what you do. Do you love this world or not? Or do you love the Lord? And he provides no one should be able to buy or sell without it. Again, we see this in the book of Ezekiel. You couldn't buy or sell. You had to have this indentation of some ridiculous sort in order to be able to trade. It won't be voluntary. This is what's coming. Now, what does this add up to? What's happening in language? What's happening in longevity? What's happening in biotechnics? There will be an icon of Satan as Jesus is the icon of God, an incarnated icon. Somehow, this is going to happen with the image of the beast. Some believe or speculate that when the Antichrist counterfeits the resurrection and is raised from the dead, he will do so by somehow indwelling this robot. Now let's understand what this is coming to, how this is going to end. You reap what you sow. You reap exactly what you sow. Turn with me, please, to Isaiah chapter 14. Isaiah chapter 14, verses 13 and 14. But you, Satan, said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I'll raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly in the recesses of the north. This alludes to the temple in Jerusalem, but it's something in the heavenlies that is reflected in Jerusalem. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds and make myself like the Most High. A created being tries to usurp the place of his creator. That which is created tries to usurp the creator. Well, let's go further. What did fallen man do? Look with me, please, to Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. For God knows in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be open. You'll be like God, knowing good and evil. You will be like God. Satan thought he could take the place of his creator. That which is created or was created thinks it can usurp the position of the creator. Fallen man, under the influence of Satan, does the same thing. You can be God. The created can become in the place of the creator. Remember, Antichrist means not only against, but in place of Christ. This will be the ultimate expression of the human rebellion and of the satanic rebellion. The Antichrist and false prophet, as we call them. That which is created thinks it can take over the place of the creator. Where wet technology, that wet refers to cerebral spinal fluid in brain tissue, which the brain floats. Wet technology, that is organic technology, the way human mind, human brain processes information and data and thinks creatively and analytically. That's the wetware. Digital programs is the software. The computers and robots are the hardware. You got the hard, the soft, and the wet. These things will converge somehow in the image of the beast, I'm quite sure. Right now, artificial intelligence, as incredible as it is, cars that can drive themselves, G5 is being set up to accommodate AI. Just look at Alexa, and that's the early days of it. Incredible as it is, will become more incredible. And it will eventually be combined with organic data processing in order to achieve cognitive capacity. In other words, the ability to think the way a human mind does. Again, we warned 25, 30 years ago that biogenetic engineering was going to be used to attempt reincarnation. They will clone someone's DNA and bring them back. But it won't be them, but people will accept it's them. It'll look like them, maybe speak like them, have their DNA. Hinduism will no longer be seeing people coming back as frogs or as Dalit or whatever. They might be coming back as a Brahmin. In fact, we can make a Brahmin in a test tube and do it with IVF. They will use technology to facilitate the occult. Remember, going back 30 years, I said 30 years ago, we are going to see a rapprochement between science and the occult. With the Enlightenment, chemistry and physics went one way, magic went the other. Previously, they were both alchemy. Magic, chemistry were the same. With the Enlightenment, they split. Astronomy and astrology were the same. With the Enlightenment, they split. The occult of astrology went one way, the science of astronomy went another. Folk medicine, the same. The superstition went one way, the sciences of medicine and pharmacology went another. Okay. We are seeing a rapprochement of science and the occult, as I predicted 30 years ago. I said 30 years ago, it's going to happen in computer video graphics. It is going to happen in holistic medicine, Eastern medicine, coming to the West, and it is going to happen in particle physics. So far, I've been right. But there was one thing I did not know about 30 years ago. There is one thing I only first heard about 10 years ago. Artificial intelligence. And now, with efforts afoot to achieve AI organically, not with silicone chips or other microchips, to do it organically, there will be a drive to achieve cognitive capacity. A bionic machine that can think like a human, or at least appear to. Now, when people are cloned, where are their spirits going to come from? Somehow there's going to be demonoids. We know that. Jesus said it'll be just as in the days of Noah, there will be demonoids. These spirits will come down and inhabit humans. But here we see something of a bionic demonoid that has cognitive capacity. Pay attention. Satan thought he could replace God, displace God. The created being, Lucifer, the angel of light, thought that he could displace and replace his creator. In the fall of man in the garden, and again with the Tower of Babel, nothing will be impossible for them. Fallen man thought he could displace and replace his creator. The creator is attacked by the created. The created is so powerful that it thinks it can take over that which created it. God acknowledged this because we're imaginary beings. Nothing will be impossible for them. Nothing. With demonic power, so it goes. Fallen angelic power, nothing will be impossible. If God set the limit on 80 years, he cannot allow average longevity to go beyond 80 years, as we've said many times. If God divided people by languages, he cannot allow digital technology to make one language again. Man cannot reverse the Tower of Babel. With human technology, God will have to intervene. But something else is going to happen. In the garden, in the Tower of Babel, in eternity with Satan in Isaiah 14, the created thought it could displace and replace the creator. When bionic technology run by artificial intelligence becomes organic, it will eventually achieve a cognitive capability. This robot, something people created, built, will think it can displace and replace that which created it. What Satan did to God, he's going to do again, or attempt to, with the image of the beast. What fallen man under the influence of Satan attempted in the garden with the fall and attempted with the Tower of Babel, he's going to try again. The created will think it can replace the creator. But now, the perpetrator becomes the victim. What Satan tried to do to God, what man tried to do to God, cognitively capable artificial intelligence will one day try to do to us. And that day is coming a lot faster than most of us think. This is what's going to happen. Now, there's a lot more to this. We've gone on a long time. These subjects cannot be explained easily or concisely. I've done my best to give you a nutshell version. The deception you're seeing among believers, the way the world is gravitating politically, and racial division, and wars coming from it, and the way artificial intelligence is developing and being developed, going into the organic realm, together with other scientific advances in biogenetic engineering, we are heading for the image of the beast. We tried to replace God. We're going to create a monster under the influence of Satan who will try to replace us. And except for the elect, except for the saved by Jesus, will succeed. God intervened in the garden. He intervened in Babylon. And he will intervene once again. Jesus is coming soon.